Hey, good morning, everybody. As always, it is great to see you on this beautiful day in Minnesota from wherever you are. Please share a greeting and tell us where you're from. We'd love to connect with you today as we connect together. So I encourage you all morning, share your thoughts, share greetings, all of these things as we work together for God's glory. I want to remind you that today is a Matthew 25 drive-through food distribution day. Our bags that go into 400 families' homes are ready to go, and they're heavy, and we always need help during the week and weekends and on Sundays, and honestly, God always provides. There are always enough volunteers to make it happen every time. But I encourage you to get involved. If not this, then something in your community that matters, that is demonstrating the hands and feet of Christ. And so that being said, a couple of our runners, leaders, are going on vacation again. Wendy and Kent are back. But a couple are going next weekend and the following weekend. And so one of the things I do is I pick up from Coburn's in Ramsey. And so I'm going to be filling in a little bit for Dan and Sue while they're gone. So I need help next Saturday, the next 2 Saturdays at 8:15 a.m. You got to have a vehicle and be able to lift at least a little bit. If not, then we'll work together and figure it out anyway. You got to have a vehicle you can drive and come help me. So the next 2 Saturdays and then Sundays at 12 noon, 8:15 on the Saturdays, 12 noon on Sundays, the next 2. If you can help with this, email me. Michael, would you share my email address in the chat so it's easy? Email me. We need you to sign up in advance because we can't have 12 people. It's just too much for the grocery store, but we need like 3. So I'm 1, 2, and 3. We're looking for you. Let me know if you can help. I'd love to have you. Let's pray together. Gracious God, as we work together to love you, to learn to love ourselves and to love our neighbor, God, teach us in all ways to be faithful and loyal to love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We're looking at, thank you, Michael, we're looking at a story this morning. Somebody's telling me they can't see it on Facebook, but I can. Okay, so we're right. We're looking at a story we've been talking about for several weeks now, and these are about some Old Testament characters. And this one in particular is about the story of Gideon. We talked about this the last few weeks, so I'm going to summarize. Gideon was an unlikely leader that God put in a place to do incredible things. And God very deliberately sent the Israelite people under Gideon's leadership into battle with very few people, like 300, against 130,000 or so, we think, estimates, in Midian. And the people of God prevailed. So it was God's way of creating miracle after miracle to show these people that God would be faithful to them and that love was the right way, the best way to do things. But after this battle, this amazing battle that they won by blowing horns and smashing pots, this is a kind of an image that kind of gets that together. Hi, Jan. After this battle, Gideon did some things that we need to talk about a little bit. Well, he started to go after the kings of Midian, the 2 kings, because he wanted revenge. Now, nothing in the Bible says that he was commanded or asked or anything to do this. He just sort of took it upon himself, I think, to go out there and try to get revenge. And Gideon stood up. Once he found these 2 leaders, Zebah and Zalmunna, he killed them. He just slaughtered them. He slaughtered all their people too. And he took the crescents that they wore on their camels' necks, meaning that he took their sign of their royalty. Well, see, all of this was Gideon. What happened? Where did you go? How'd you get from being the humble guy to a guy who goes out and like slaughters people? That was a new thing here in the story, and it was really scary. After that happened, the people of Israel looked at Gideon differently. In a powerful way, they say this to Gideon. The Israelites said, "Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson. You have saved us from Midian's tyranny." And this really matters because God made it very clear that the idea was that the people would understand that it was God who saved them, not themselves and not Gideon, and not worshiping any other gods either. And so for them to say that it was Gideon who saved them, that was a really bad thing. That was not good. Gideon answers in a beautiful way. He says, I won't rule over you, nor will my son. God will reign over you. Even though he went murdering people, he still says the right thing here, but then he makes a big error. He said, but I do have one request. Give me each of you an earring that you took as plunder. And this is a common thing to do. They spread out a blanket. Okay, think of like pirates who save all the plunder, right? Well, they did it back then, okay? They spread out a blanket. Each man threw plundered earrings on it. They were gold. And these were the gold that Gideon had asked for. And they weighed about 43 pounds. Ha! And that didn't include all the crescents and the fabrics and all these other things. And the ornaments, all sorts of stuff. And Gideon did this. He made the gold into a sacred ephod. And I told you last week we would talk about this week. So here we are on the ephod. He put it on display, hi Deb, in his hometown Ophrah. Okay? But here's what happened. The people of his day, instead of worshiping God for saving them and trusting God to rule over them, guess what they started doing? They started to worship the ephod. The Israelites were unfaithful to God and worshiped it, and it became a trap for Gideon and his family. This is from the Message. But listen how this version, I think it's the New Common Version, explains it. Listen to this. All Israel, this is more true to the real language, prostituted itself there. Do you know what that means? They sold themselves to worship this ephod, which is the thing on his neck. We think ephod's really weird in the Bible. Anyway, it's strange. And how he put it up in the town, we don't know. Perhaps it was a statue with an ephod on it or a monument that looked weird. Gideon and his family were seduced by it too, which meant that even Gideon and his family started to worship this object instead of God. I mean, maybe they thought they were worshiping God, but essentially it was the object that they had to have. Why did Gideon even make an ephod? Where does that even come from? I mean, what a weird thing to do. Well, as it turns out, this goes all the way back to the book of Exodus, which was a long, long time before, when Moses was instructed by God to make an ephod when he anointed his brother Aaron as high priest. This really matters. Let's talk about this. Oh, wait, sorry. Here's the garments of the high priest. You can kind of see the pieces and such of it. But what I want to talk about now is Moses. Moses, all the way back in Exodus, you know, the guy who saw God in the burning bush. I mean, the experiences that God had with Moses, or they had together, were just amazing and visceral. And as they move along, Moses' brother Aaron is going to be anointed as high priest. And so here we are in Exodus 28. And that's a artwork of Aaron being as high priest. And you see the thing on his chest. It just looks like the ephod. Oh, thank you, Christine, for that note. I'm so glad you were able to get on. Good, good. Because I couldn't find a problem on our end. I'm glad you made it. So here we are in Exodus 28, verse 3. God said through Moses, here's the instructions to build the ephod. Tell all who are skilled, to whom I have given special abilities, to make clothing for Aaron for his dedication to serve me as a priest. These are the articles of clothing that they should make. Now, this is a very detailed list. I encourage you to look at it. The link's in the chat. This is very detailed, down to how they use gold, blue, purple yarns, and then this ornamental vest, a belt attached to it, deep red yarns with fine twisted linen, and then there's instructions. Take 2 gemstones and engrave on them the names of Israel's sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. Now that's a history. 6 names on one stone, and then other 6 names on the other stone in the order of their birth. So the 12 tribes of Israel. So when Aaron's going forward as the high priest, he's representing all of Israel with God. And then there's more instructions. Like a gem cutter who engraves official seals, you will engrave the 2 stones with the names of Israel's sons, mount them in gold settings. And then there's even more instruction. Attach the vest to shoulder pieces. This is what it looks like without the text in it. Isn't that incredible? I mean, it had to cost a fortune to make that in that time. It would cost a fortune now. Imagine all that gold. But God very specifically instructed this. And this is what Aaron, the high priest with Moses, wore when he did all the priesty stuff. You know how pastors wear albs or collars or I don't know what, all sorts of stuff? When he did priesty stuff, this is what he wore, this ornate outfit with this gold thing on the front. And especially when he entered the Holy of Holies. That's a long story, but the people felt that this protected Aaron from being destroyed by the power of God too. It's a long story there, but let's go forward with this for now, and someday we'll talk about that too. So this is really, really important. God, through Moses, instructed the people to make the original ephod back in Exodus. And there's some other things along the way, but this is really critical. God did not instruct Gideon to make an ephod, but Gideon did anyway. Perhaps, thank you, Priesty, perhaps Gideon didn't realize what was going to happen when he made the ephod. He didn't realize that stepping out of God's plan or instruction for him or whatever that is right at this juncture was not a good idea. God did not instruct Gideon to make the ephod. This is important. And this is a side note here. Check this. This is a theme we've been running all along. Instructions in the Bible are often meant for only that person or those people in that time. Take note. We try to say that the Bible has all the answers. Well, some of the things in the Bible were written only for a certain group of people in a certain time and a certain place. But if we try to make everything in the Bible for all people, for all times and all places, what a mess we would have. You have to be very careful to discern the Bible carefully, so we know what God intends for us today and what God might intend just for those people. God did not instruct Gideon to make an ephod, and it caused a lot of problems because it turned God's people backwards, back to times and yes, at times and for everyone. It created huge, huge problems, because here is what happened next in the story of Gideon. Now, if you're not familiar with this kind of picture, this is basically an idol to a god that was worshipped during that time called Baal, okay? And so what happened right after this story of Midian and the making of the ephod and the people worshiping it, that was a gateway to something else. And so time goes on, there was peace in the land, but listen to this, right after Gideon died. Here we are in Judges 8:33-35. Right after Gideon died, the Israelites once again acted unfaithfully by worshiping the Baals, setting up Baal Berith as their god. And as a result, the people of Israel didn't remember the Lord their God. Think about generations and stories that don't get told, who had delivered them from the power of all their enemies on every side. They started worshiping this other thing. Nor did they act loyally toward the household of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, because Gideon's name was changed. That's another thing. In return for all the good that he had done on Israel's behalf. Listen, over time, from that moment after these amazing, miraculous battles, that time from when Gideon made the ephod, he wasn't supposed to do that, he did. Over time, it resulted in them worshiping this other god, Baal. And then they forgot about God completely. Worship of Baal was bad. Listen, what they thought Baal required of them were things like human and even child sacrifice. Think about that for a moment. Human sacrifice, a human being turned upside down. I don't need to go be graphic here about this. And child sacrifice. Do you see this? This is what they thought Baal wanted from them. It was not a good thing. It was absolutely horrible. And why? Why would they choose to worship Baal, this idol and this image of Baal, this God in the clouds and the Baals? There were a lot of them, when God was right there with them, providing miracles, against all odds, victories. Why? Why would they turn to something again like this? And that making of the ephod was like the gateway drug to it. They were so prone to worshiping idols in that day that just that little entrance by making the ephod against God's instruction. God didn't instruct him to do it. He did it anyway. Maybe he thought it was a good thing. I don't know, but that sort of set the door open for them to go right back to idol worship. So we kind of joke about things like that here. Like, we're always joking about candy, like, oh, get that candy away from me. We even call it a gateway drug because many of us know we get ridiculous amounts of candy once in a while. Like, I think we got 20 banana boxes of candy last Friday. Crazy. We end up having to give it all over the community just to move it. But if I eat a piece of candy, then I'm going to eat candy tomorrow and the next day and the next day. So that little thing threw the Israelite people off, that building of that ephod, and they started worshiping Baal again. That's what it led to. Yes, Mary, we're about to get there. It comes down to what you can see and not see. You can see the idol, but not God, right? And so why did people worship idols at all during that time? Why did they choose literal objects in representation of other gods? Why did they even worship gods at all? So I want you to see this video. It's really good. It's by Mark Leeming, and it's called The 1 Minute Preacher, although it's not 1 minute, it's like 3. But listen to how he talks about why the Israelites worshipped gods. I think this is fascinating.
Have you ever wondered why ancient people worshipped idols? Well, the Jewish prophet Isaiah wondered as well. Even though one of the 10 Commandments clearly forbids the making and worship of idols, nevertheless, during his day, idols stretched from one end of Israel to the other. And in chapter 44 of Isaiah, he sarcastically described how idols were made. A craftsman would go out into the forest and carefully select a tree. And then, while he would use one half of that tree for firewood, with the other he would painstakingly carve out an idol and then bow down before it and say, "You are my God, save me." It drove Isaiah crazy. And in verse 19 he wrote, "No one stops to think, no one has a knowledge or understanding to say, half of it I used for fuel. I even baked bread over its coals. I roasted meat and I ate. Shall I make a detestable thing from what is left? Shall I bow down to a block of wood?" Why did ancient people have this compelling need to worship idols? Now, probably the first place to begin is with some questions. Why does it rain? What causes droughts? What causes earthquakes? What causes illnesses? Why are there some women unable to have children? Why does the River Nile only flood at a certain time of year? Now, as modern people, our immediate inclination is to explain those phenomena in naturalistic terms, that nature is governed by a set of natural laws, and not because there's this pantheon of deities who are pulling nature's strings, so to speak, like a marionette puppet. And yet, the immediate inclination of ancient people was to view those things in its supernatural terms. Science hadn't been invented yet. They really did see nature as being governed by a whole host of deities who were often fickle and easily angered, especially if you didn't worship them in the right way. And the standard model back then, held by all of the advanced civilizations such as Egypt, was that there was no single deity, no one god who was powerful enough to be able to control all of those strings. And so they believed that there were all these different deities, all these different gods. Each one had a special sphere of influence who demanded to be worshipped or else. And there was a vast array of deities that needed to be worshipped back then. There were your national gods, there were your local gods, the gods of your town and village. There were your household and family gods. And it was believed that idols were the physical representation of these different deities. So that when a craftsman made an idol, that the god whom it supposedly represented, that the god would literally inhabit that block of wood. But the Jewish belief in only one God, who forbade the making and worship of idols, it turned this whole ancient belief system upon its head. Make no mistake, it was a radical departure from the perceived wisdom of the time. To the ancient person, it seemed foolhardy to say the least and required a tremendous amount of faith. Furthermore, to the standard ancient mindset, the belief in only one God who did not inhabit an idol was considered a very dangerous idea. Dangerous not just to the individual who held it, but dangerous to the well-being of their family, their community, their nation. Not only would the gods be angry with that one particular person, but they would take vengeance upon everyone else.
I want you to think about that for just a minute. It was dangerous to not worship this God or these gods because of what would happen to you and your family. This fear and forced worship pervades our world. Incite fear, and now your loyalty must be to me because I'm the only one who will save you. Even in the church, we create idols, if you will, out of our practices about anything. A fear of going to hell, and we create things to help us feel safe so we won't have to go to hell. This is not what love is about. See, the people of Israel worshiped idols because they were afraid. Can't you have a lot more mercy for them when you think about it that way? And frankly, it's why we worship idols today. I'm convinced of it. Because we're afraid. Maybe we buy into a fear that's not legit. But even the people in that day, they didn't understand. Like this is an image of maybe a drought. They didn't understand, like Mark just shared with us. The droughts, where did they come from? Why did they happen? Maybe we didn't please that God. And there were probably people who benefited from this worship too, who would have perpetuated it. Or floods, or storms at sea, or inability to feed their families, or volcanoes. They were afraid. And if you worship this God, you will hopefully have control over your circumstances. Yes, Jan, fear makes people do crazy things. Anxiety is a heck of a driver. So is shame. Yes, that's right. Christine, keep going. People worshiped idols and hoping that their crops would grow, they'd have enough food to feed their families, in hopes that nobody would get sick or be unwell. They worshiped idols to gain some control over their environment or their circumstances because they were afraid. They were afraid and they didn't understand. Guys, we do this. Our tendency to be afraid is fair. This is a scary world. But who do we turn to? Or what do we worship when we're afraid? In that time, it's really important to notice that it was considered dangerous to not worship Baal. Do you hear the language of fear? This is not love to me. It was dangerous. And so somebody who went against that, or a whole group of people who went against it, were causing problems for everyone. And yet, they had done it. And that's what makes this story so painful. Hear me say this. What makes this story about Israel going back to Baal worship after Gideon's victories is because Gideon had led God's people to courageously, 2 chapters before, destroy the altar to Baal. They destroyed the idols and they went with God. That's why they even went into battle with only 300 people. They would have never done it. Baal would have never recommended. You get me, right? That would have been sacrificed children. But God led them through these miracles because they had destroyed the idols. They had destroyed the idols, which was incredibly crazy and very, very dangerous. Read about this in Judges 6:25-32. With God's help, Gideon destroyed the altar of Baal. It must have just been an exhilarating time of faith, overcoming fear, trust. I want you to understand what destroying an idol can be like. It matters. The idols that hold us, the things that keep us afraid in order to keep our loyalty. Can we say, no, I'm not going to be afraid? No, that's not what this fear of this is legitimate, but this is not the answer. I don't need this in my life. This is important. I want you to see this image. I found this, and this shifted my way of even preaching the sermon today. I'm actually going to get my face out of the way so you can see more of it, okay? You'll be able to hear me, but look at this image. It's so moving to me. This guy has destroyed an idol, and it comes up when you Google images, art about Gideon destroying the idol. And it's just so amazing. Look at his face. And look how there's red down there, almost like blood. The courage it takes to destroy something that we honestly believe we have to have, and we're afraid not to have, or to let it go, or to even move it to a lower priority. Whatever it is, the courage it takes to do that is extraordinary in some people's lives. You need to hear that. Because we have idols that are all kinds of things that we really think we have to have. We really believe we do. I love this image. It means a lot. Imagine the courage. Remember, as soon as Gideon was gone, the people of Israel didn't remember the Lord their God. Does that mean they actually did worship Gideon? Because once Gideon was there, why couldn't they just trust in God? Well, you hit it, Mary. Because these were things they could see or feel, or they thought. And God requires tremendous amount of faith. Faith alone. See, here's the thing. We have to believe in God. And I'm going to use this word in place of God. We have to believe in love, because the Bible is clear on this. God is love. We have to believe in love. And so anything that competes for our loyalty, anything that competes from our desire to love God, love ourselves, and love our neighbor, anything that tries to take priority over love is going to be a problem. And we can make them into idols all the time. There are so many things that compete for our loyalty, constantly wanting to pull us in different directions or back to a place that we've stepped away from. Here's what I want to ask. What does it look like to be loyal to God? What does it look like to be loyal to love? What does that look like? What if you said, my first loyalty in my life is going to be love? That's you, God. What would change? Think about it. It's so easy for us to give something else our loyalty, even partially. It's so easy to get pulled aside, and this happens everywhere in our world. Everywhere. It happens in politics, geopolitical things. It happens in how we care for our earth. Are we willing? It happens in how we treat our friends, our families. It happens in how we live our lives. Are we going to love God, truly love ourselves, and love neighbor? Yeah, Christine, I think so. But I think we worship more than our smartphones. Think about it. We're going to talk about this over the coming weeks. Like, what are the things that we might give just a little too much importance in our lives? What are the things that are overshadowing our decisions about how to love? Are we willing to be loyal to love? Psalm 115, 4-8. The idols of the nations are silver and gold, the work of man's hands. They have mouths, but they cannot speak. They have eyes, but they cannot see. They have ears, but they cannot hear. They have noses, but they cannot smell. They have hands, but they cannot feel. They have feet, but they cannot walk. Nor can they make a sound with their throats. These idols, you guys, they're not legit. Those who make them, this is the most important, will become like them. Everyone who trusts in them. When we give our loyalty to things that are standing in the way of love, we will become like that. Hands that can't move, voices that have no positive meaning in this world. This is why our loyalty matters. So 1 John 5:21, dear children, keep away from anything that might take God's place in your hearts. And Jonah 2:8, those who pay regard to false, useless, and worthless idols forsake their own source of mercy and loving kindness. And God's words in Exodus 20, I am the Lord your God who has brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before or besides me. And do you know why? Because love is the answer. Love is the way. That's why. Because love is the answer and love is the way. And God knows that. God knows that worshiping other things or even prioritizing them, it can be anything like our interpretation of the Bible, our commitment to a rule, anything that causes us to not love someone, to not live a life of love. Anything that steps in the way of love is a worthless thing in our lives. And it's dangerous for all of us, right? I just said that word. Love calls us to love and not live in fear. And not be pulled away by all the things that might compete for our attention, even our past. Love calls us to prioritize love over everything. And so I'm praying that we'll be willing, friends, to keep going against the flow, because this is pervasive in church too. The loyalties to programs or things or systems or ideas or theologies that keep us from actually loving our neighbor. I hope we'll be willing, I know we will, to persevere forward. Keep honing so that love is continually lifted up, so that we can keep going where God is leading us in the ways of loving God, loving ourselves, caring for ourselves, and loving the people around us, everyone, our neighbor. So I'm going to be praying for you that this will entice some thought in your heart and mind, that something grabbed you in this where you're saying, okay, I can see that this thing in my mind or this rule that I have or this thing that I love or whatever it is, politics, I don't know, is actually not, it should be lower because it's not leaning into love. It's actually going to lean me in a direction I don't want to go. Think about it. Where are your priorities? Ask God to help you see where you might have things in your lives that are competing for loyalty. Things maybe you need to let go or even destroy. So I'm going to be praying for you that the light of God's love would be lifted up so high in your life that it will make anything that's causing shadows to appear very clearly. May you be blessed by God's continued presence and peace. May God continue to lead you in the ways of love for God, for yourself, and for others around you, for everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm glad you were able to connect. I encourage you to get involved wherever you are. And if you can help me next Saturday and Sunday or the following Saturday and Sunday, reach out, let me know. I'd love to work with you and show you how all this works. Wouldn't it be cool to see where the food comes from? And this is only one source. Anyway, much love to all of you. Take care, and I really look forward to seeing you soon. Take care again.